Let's watch a CNN panel discuss the current controversy in Washington as MAGA and Elon Musk are now pushing for a full-on government shutdown, costing tens of thousands of workers their paychecks, thousands of Americans their benefits, and a pause on much-needed infrastructure projects, all in the name of not working bipartisanly and owning the libs. So let's watch the panel and jump back in where we can with the context.
It's not just about understanding how the government works, as important as that is. It's also about being an effective manager, and I think it's a myth, and we just saw that because why would you just announce on Twitter that you oppose this legislation to keep the government open 72 or so hours before a deadline to shut down the government? I mean, if he was serious about cutting pork and doing all this other stuff that Republican conservatives are talking about, then they would have been very much involved in this text thread that Speaker Johnson was saying. Throughout that entire process.
I think they're afraid of shutting down the government anyway. I mean, remember, it was in Trump's last administration that they did exactly that.
And they paid a political
price.
Yes,
that's exactly what I was going to say.
Shutting down the government is not popular, and Americans are not stupid. They know who to blame.
The problem is MAGA is now getting their info on government spending from Vivek and Elon, who benefit massively from steering spending towards private infrastructure and private public partnerships, where Elon, for instance, makes 92% of his wealth from Tesla and SpaceX. They make the predominant of their wealth as companies from government contracts, right? And they're billionaires who, again, they're going to lie to the working class to get them on board for things that will actually hurt them, like shutting down the government, right? Like convincing their base that this bill includes massive pay increases and health benefit expansions. It's funny because they went to Twitter and MAGA, you can tell they're all getting their info from Vivek and Elon, because now that Vivek released this video talking about, I read the bill and here's what's in it. MAGA is parroting like what he said, even though a lot of the things he's talking about have been debunked. He said there was funding for like a sports building, been debunked. He said Congress is going to get $40,000 pay increases, been debunked. And half the country now thinks that shutting down the government is something that will benefit them, even though it definitely won't. And they also think they're doing it because Congress is trying to like corruptly like raise their own pay. It's all just a misnomer, but this is the MAGA playbook, right? Say the government is broken, then go out of your way to break it, and then go, look, see, we told you it was broken. And then you can privatize more and more things to further enrich the wealthy while pricing out the poor.
Members of Congress, if they got paid more, I think would be less likely to engage in the kind of corruption that we have seen.
It's been, what, 10 years?
It has been since 2009, is my understanding, since members of Congress got a raise. And this is by exemption. I mean, it should be automatic in the way other salaries in the federal government are, but it's because they voted to do precisely this. And so the recent proposal of raising the salary by $6,600 is still much less than it would have been if those automatic increases that everyone else in the federal government benefits from apply to members of Congress.
The problem here is MAGA is trying to disingenuously use a problem they don't actually care about, which is this sort of class struggle, right? To spark an outrage and gain support when it's actually more of a distraction to their actual goal, which is taking power from the public sector, which helps all. It provides a baseline of care even for those under the line of which could afford where it's profitable. And they want to move that power to the private sector, to where only those who can meet the baseline standard of what is profitable for the company can get the care. And they understand that people will say, well, yeah, Congress members make too much. Why do they make six figures when I'm not even making $40,000 a year? Even though that's them kind of pointing their rage at the wrong places. They should be pointing it at the corporations and the corporate owners. And then to the extent they would be Congress members, it would be like the Republicans that allow the corporate owners to do this to them. And I mean, in most respects, Congress members do make a lot, right? This is a conversation we could have. But to be clear, like Republicans are the ones who try to get these congressional raises also, which is why it's a misnomer to put in this conversation. They tried to pass it last summer in the House. It's Democrats who blocked it. Chuck Schumer in the Senate literally last summer blocked this from happening. And this is now where what's happening is they're just allowing for a cost of living adjustment, and a provision that was passed in 1989. It would be less than if the pay actually tracked the cost of living, which is what Democrats have been preventing preventing. And this is the norm for federal jobs. It's only now that MAGA can use this for political gain that they want to try and highlight it and pretend it's like Democrats trying to sneak in pay raises, when what we're talking about is a $6,000 pay increase for senators in costly states. So it would be like a handful in places like the Bronx, LA, where you could easily make an argument that this is warranted. I mean, the cost of living is high in these cities. And then you have to think that they're also paying for like rooms in DC at that to go to their meetings, the constant travel back and forth. And again, it also includes the ability for them to opt out of the ACA and opt into an existing federal benefits program that Vivek and MAGA is now trying to pretend that they're giving themselves expanded health benefits, but they're literally not.
When I was in Congress, I barely saved. In fact, I did not save anything because when I was there, we didn't even have per diem, right? So I was paying for rent in Westchester County, New York, and in D.C. People, the average American thinks, by the way, that members of Congress have their D.C. expenses paid for. That's not true.
There are members
until
of
recently. Congress
who have roommates. They all get a townhouse. There are members of Congress who have lived in their offices. Now, maybe the Republicans don't worry about that because they're all rich.
Not true.
The Democrats certainly.
To be fair, most of the Democrats are rich in Congress too. And I think that's the other problem, right? Like when you actually pay people, commensurate with what the role entails, provided they're doing their job correctly, you'll get people who are talented and who want that job.
I think that's right.
I mean, people are making people who are the people you want in Congress are people who could get paid really well in the private sector, but you want them to make a financial sacrifice for the public good, and so you have to pay those people well. It also keeps out younger people and working class people who are not independently wealthy, which is why Congress is full of millionaires.
He was the first millennial.
And this is something that even me myself had to bite the bullets with and come to terms on as I learned more about the government, that shows like how a lot of these positions are kind of born from ignorance, where MAGA, even a lot of people who feel themselves they aren't making enough and they want to point at people who make more. And it's extra ironic when it's MAGA because, it's actual rich guys like Vivek and Elon who are pushing this message, but they want to convince you that it's all these rich elites in the government, which again, don't get me wrong, plenty of Congress members are, with how they abuse things like insider trading, like Dan Crenshaw or Nancy Pelosi. But there's also plenty who aren't, who are paying rent in, again, like LA, but then also having to pay it in DC, New York and DC, and then also having constant travels. They need housing in both locations. It's not like they're pocketing six figures. And actually a great point being made here as well is the fact that they're underpaid, right? The fact that they are paid this little is what leads to the corruption that we so much want to avoid, where the other side of this, if we look at it, is the ones with the actual skills, at least, and the talents that aren't just benefiting from gerrymandered districts. They have talents in which they could make a lot more if they chose to do these things in the private sector, if they chose to join like boards for corporations, right? So what we want to do is pay them enough to entice them into public service to where they're not going into the private sector instead. It's not like they should make pennies. I mean, you get what you pay for. Also, I think if we weren't paying workers such shit wages, like if they were making what they deserved as well, there wouldn't be this anger about congressional pay, because it's not like they're outrageously paid for the benefits they bring. It's just like, why can't all workers be paid equally, right? Why is it congressional workers? Like, why at the same time that they're getting paid their benefits, are they shooting down workers from getting theirs? Which that is a good conversation, but MAGA doesn't want to have that conversation. They want the conversation of, let's shut down the government because of inefficiency, even though they passed the Doge Act and don't even go after the Pentagon spending. So like, how much do they really care about inefficiencies? This is not the conversation they want to have. They just want to shut down the government, and they want to use any leverage they can to make it seem like what they're doing is righteous somehow, because that's how they've realized, they could take the high ground of these issues. But there are those who seep through this, right? Don't get me wrong. There's the Marjorie Greens, there's the Lauren Boebert, who are definitely overpaid for the quality they bring. And if we want to talk about gerrymandering, the gerrymandering that allows them to stay in power despite not bringing the quality or being worth the pennies that we pay them, I'm all for that. But again, not the conversation MAGA wants to have. And in terms of those who are like on these actual committees that are investigating government corruption in terms of like oversight, investigating like corporations, inequality, judicial issues, like those directing infrastructure and government projects, driving legislation, I have yet to hear an argument as to why them making $6,000 more a year if they live in a costly state like New York is so egregious that we need to reject benefits like WIC, SNAP to thousands of people. wages from tens of thousands of workers, like federally paid construction workers who would be out of pay for however many weeks that this went on, government paid domestic violence advocates who would either be out of work or out of pay for weeks, however many weeks that this went on. Why is it that all of this needs to be halted? Funding to infrastructure, to these agencies, again, affecting these smaller programs like state-run ABA therapy for like autistic children, like the downstream effects of this would be massive. And I haven't heard one argument as to why that's justified. And I don't think like 10 senators making $6,000 more a year is that reason, right? And then also when you're lying about like, well, they're giving themselves expanded health benefits. Like, no, you're just allowing them to get off of this plan onto an existing plan over here. And again, it's all just misnomers, but I think it's telling that the last government shutdown was under Trump and Republicans, and here they are to do it again as to who they really care about and what they want to do with the government, where again, their plan is say it's broken, get in, break it, say, look, we told you it was broken, and then privatize more things like they're now trying to do with USP, with the Postal Service, right? Where good luck to those in rural areas trying to get packages, now having to pay $30 to get your package, right? Like, because it's not profitable for Jeff Bezos to ship there.